Today, we have an extraordinary guest whose journey is nothing short of remarkable. From navigating the depth of clinical depression to hitchhiking in her pajamas on a busy interstate during a maniac episode, her story is one of profound transformation and resilience. Overcoming self stigma and doubt, she emerged as an inspiration, illuminating the path to empowerment for others. Michelle, thank you so much for being in here with us today.
Thank you so much, Wayne, for having me.
Your journey from experiencing clinical depression to becoming a beacon of resilience and empowerment is truly amazing. Could you share with us how your personal struggles with mental health have shaped your approach to coaching and speaking on the topic? And maybe let's go back a little and start with your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it was a day in my 20s that would change the course of my life. There was a time where I remember driving home and I got a thought that it would be so easy. And I remember I was slumped over in my car, leaning my head against my hand. I had a red Honda Civic at the time, and it was taking all of my energy to drive home from work. And I got this thought of just veering my car a little over the white line. There was traffic coming in the other direction, an 18-wheeler. And I had that thought. I didn't want to be here anymore, and it scared me. And slowly I found my work began to suffer. And some of us may have a tendency when that happens to lose concentration and focus. It's I always called it that my insides were shaking or my hands were trembling. It got to the point that I heard laughter in the office and I thought people were laughing at me. I was so paranoid and insecure at that time. My family um worried. So eventually it all got to be too much and I had to take a leave of absence from work. My family worried. I was in my late 20s at the time, and my family worried about my mindset and living on my own. And I had this wonderful apartment at the time that had high ceilings and bay windows with tons of light. There was a sunflower painted on the living room wall. I loved this apartment, and I had to move out of it and into my old bedroom in the home I grew up in. And then I really felt like a failure. My friends were buying houses, getting promotions, and I couldn't drag myself out of bed each day. 2 months passed. I was out of work for 2 months. And slowly, with medication and therapy, I started to heal. But I remember that day I had to return to work. I was terrified. People knew where I was and what happened. I was embarrassed. And I remember reaching for the door that day to walk inside the office for the first time after 2 months. And it had one of those bells, the bells that ding every time someone enters. The bell dinged and everybody looked up at me and I froze. I didn't know what to do. And the administrative assistant at the time, Marcy, came over and gave me a hug. And I felt my body relax a little bit. And then she whispered something in my ear that told me everything would be okay. And all she said was, I take Prozac too. In that moment, letting me know that I wasn't alone gave me the strength and courage I needed to walk in and see the rest of the team. It was a powerful moment, one I obviously still remember today, and the story should have ended there, but it didn't. Fast forward 3 years, I'm doing better. I put the experience behind me, and things are going really well. I'm working as a writer at a national publication, and it started to happen again. But this time, it was followed by something I never experienced before, and that's mania. And after several sleepless nights, I found myself disoriented, hitchhiking on a busy interstate. But the irony of that situation is you have to understand I was someone that never went anywhere without my 5-inch heels. I was always wearing 5-inch heels, but I had on Tasmanian devil boxer shorts that were ripped. The boxer shorts were boxer shorts. I had on a t-shirt that was ripped all the way up to my left breast, and I was barefoot, and I had my dog with me who wasn't on the leash. And I'm on the side of the road hitchhiking and couldn't understand why nobody was stopped. And luckily, I had a guardian angel with me that day, and a fire truck came and picked me up, and I was taken to a hospital. But that experience and what I made it mean, when I had to return to work again, I was humiliated and ashamed. I let my illness define me. I thought it was who I was, and I thought it was all I had to offer. I thought my mental illness defined me, and that belief and low self-worth and not feeling good enough seeped into every area of my life, because after that, that same feeling when that bell dinged that day and I had to walk in the office, that one moment of utter insecurity and fear, it was now an everyday experience. Um, I let those feelings seep in. And at that point, I stopped writing. I didn't think I was good enough. I found myself in a series of toxic relationships and unfulfilling jobs. I was completely disconnected from my authentic self, the person that I really wanted to be. So I lowered my expectations of myself and my place in the world. I thought that I was broken, and that feeling became my comfort zone. That became a comfortable place for me to be. And for many years, I stayed there. I was stuck, and that's where I remained. It wasn't until I met someone with similar experiences, and she had the same experiences, but she didn't wear them like a dark cloud hanging over her head. She held her head high and when she spoke, it was with conviction and purpose.
Mm.
And she became my mentor and helped me realize that my illness never defined me and that I was never broken. It was only my perception that was broken. That perception of being less than, that perception of not being good enough. And my mental health journey was really the catalyst that got me here as a mental wellness coach. But not feeling good enough, is a core issue that can show up for so many people in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be their mental health. It's, I'm not smart enough. I'm not successful enough. Looking at social media every day,
I'm not
I don't
beautiful enough.
have enough. Exactly.
Yeah,
I don't have what they have. I don't have enough. I need to do more. So for me, I had to really focus. I had to dig deep and focus on my mental wellness, which includes so much more than just good mental health. It's really a connection of the body and mind. There's a difference between mental health and mental wellness.
yeah, and we before we started the recording, we were talking about that, and I will love for you to elaborate a little more on that. But first, I want to thank you. It's beautiful that you are putting yourself out there and you're bringing some light to all the people that, like your friend said or your mentor said, you are not alone. Just
Mhm.
that little phrase of "you're not alone." I am in this too. I have felt this way too. I am on X, Y, and Z. Doesn't really have to be the same, in pills or anything like that, but maybe going to therapy, going to seeking help. And sometimes seeking help can be what crushes sometimes people like that.
Mhm.
We're talking about the stigma. So let me ask you, what is the difference between a mental health? Because I don't know if there's a mental health coaching or just wellness.
Mhm.
What is
Okay,
the difference
yes.
there? Because we can get a little confused with that.
Absolutely. And I just want to go back for a second before I elaborate that on something you said. Marcy, when she shared with me that she had been where I was, when we share our stories with someone else, no matter what that story is, that's empowering and that helps someone so much. Just her saying that to me that day gave me the courage I didn't have in that moment. So when we share our stories with someone else, it cuts them in half. So I wanted to comment on that. But the difference between mental health and mental wellness, in my experience, mental health involves the diagnosis. It often involves medication and therapy, maybe doctors. Um, that encompasses mental health. But mental wellness, on the other hand, is the journey. It's the process itself. It's the steps you take to get there. And for some people, that may be eating right or getting enough sleep, meditation, prayer, but it's even more than that for me. It's a complete alignment of the body and mind. And that's really being able to dig deep, which is something that I had to do when I mentioned and I talked about that not feeling good enough and focusing. Our bodies hear everything that our mind says, and we store those in our bodies. So, research has found that it only takes 90 seconds, just 90 seconds, for a sensation to pass through the body. So, if we allow it, it only takes 90 seconds to process. Anything longer than that shows we're looped in the mind. We're looped in the story. We are reinforcing it. But when we let it and we feel it, it starts to pass. So it's really that mind body connection that I focus on with the mental wellness, as well as a practice of inquiry, of questioning my thoughts. So, for example, seeing the comparison when I compare myself to others and I feel like I don't have enough, or I'm overcome with self doubt and not feeling good enough. Questioning those thoughts with, is it true? Asking yourself, can I know without a shadow of a doubt that what I'm experiencing right now is true? And it's difficult because we get those thoughts and we grab onto them and they can bring us down in an instant. But it's that one moment we have of shifting our beliefs and not holding on to it, and inquiring and asking ourselves just simply, is it true? Can I know that this is true?
Yeah, so you said something, going back to the beginning of when you were sharing your story with your mentor. You said that you lower your self expectation, and I
Mhm.
remember somebody said lower your expectations, not your standards. So I
Mhm.
love that you said that. You spoken about the importance of addressing self stigma. So let's talk a little bit about that, the self stigma and self doubt, and how can especially like the female entrepreneurs recognize and overcome these internal barriers, um, to their success, to help them succeed, whatever success means for the individual. Because for me, it might
Mhm.
be just getting up from bed and I was successful. Maybe for you, success means something else.
Absolutely. So I think you're right in what you just said, that sometimes and let me go back to mental health, when you struggle with mental health, sometimes the success is just getting out of bed. When I couldn't work and I was healing from my clinical depression, that was my success every day. If I got out of bed, it was a win.
Right.
And sometimes I think we don't give ourselves enough credit or pats on the back. We hold that success, or I'll go back to the word expectations of ourselves, up here. And we're striving and we're striving and we're striving, and we're only good enough if we get up here. And we miss it's the journey. And that goes back to the mental wellness aspect I talked about. It's all those little steps that you take to get there that make the success that much more sweet, that make it that much more fulfilling. But when you miss all those steps, then it's just, then you're in it. Then it's just the constant hustle. That's when burnout can happen, when you're go, 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 go. But what I have found and been taught is to speed up to achieve your goals. Sometimes you have to slow down. It's necessary to slow way down to get up here and acknowledge and celebrate yourself for those steps you take along the way. So maybe that's getting that email off to somebody that you wanted to do. Maybe you didn't get everything done on your to-do list today, but you got 4 things done and they were big things. Celebrating yourself for that, not looking at, I didn't, but what you did do, even if it's small, giving yourself credit for that.
Yeah, I love that because I'm always telling people, celebrate the small wins, celebrate the small wins. And when you celebrate the big ones, it's even more joyful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your journey has involves a profound shift and perception. So you were talking about
Mhm.
the perceptions, and usually when we talk about, the perceptions, we always think about perceptions of other people. And I'm glad you also brought up to the light that perception of us us
Mhm.
not judging or other people, but judging ourselves so hard, you feeling broken to realizing that you were worth it. Can you walk us through some practical, I was going to say practical, practical steps or exercises that female entrepreneurs can implement to cultivate a healthier self image and a mindset? I love talking about mindset. I'm a photographer, so I'm always telling people, you're so beautiful. You need to see yourself in the mirror and look at yourself in another light, and let me show you, So how can we cultivate that?
So the one thing that, and I shared that a little bit in my story, the one thing that really crippled me was the self stigma. What I made my illness mean about me. And it took a long time for that, for me to let go of that. And I'm talking, it has now been over 15 years since I've had um that degree of depression or mania in my life. It's been over 15 years, but that piece of self-stigma stayed with me for long after that. It's only been in the last several years that I was able to release that. So some of the things when it comes to our mindset, but I'm going to talk specifically about self stigma because it's something that's not talked about as much. When we hear the word mental health, we talk about stigma all the time. In the media, we talk about stigma all the time. But that self stigma is something we don't hear as much about. And it can show up. For me, it's mental health stigma. But self stigma can show up for people in other areas of their life, whether it's weight, whether it's what's another example? Whether it's their weight and trying to lose weight and that self stigma, or going back to just not being good enough in whatever it is they're trying to do. And that comes down to the judgments we place on ourselves. And I have found what we judge, when we judge ourselves, we're stuck with it, but what we accept in ourselves, and that goes back to those 90 seconds that I was talking about, but what we accept, we free. So, some of the ways to combat self stigma is being mindful of the language we use when we're speaking to ourselves. So, not saying I'm a failure because this didn't happen, or I'm not good enough, or I'm overweight. And if I bring it down to the mental, for my own story, it was using the words, I am depressed. That was a big one for me because many healers believe, and I agree with this, when you put whatever you put on the other end of the words I am, you tend to embody. So when I say I am depressed, or someone says I am overweight,
I am
we
sad.
I am sad, you embody that emotion. So I never say I am depressed. Instead, I say I am someone who has depression. I am someone who has mental illness. And just putting that little space around it It's such a subtle shift, but after you do it for a while, it makes a big difference. You'll notice a change when you don't embody those words, but put some healthy space around it. And another one is recognizing that what you're saying about yourself is only one part of you. So, again, back to my own story, and I'll talk about my depression and when I felt defined by my mental illness. That was all I could see. I was narrow focused. The only thing I could see was the judgment I had on myself. But recognizing there are so many other parts to me. I am a sister. I am a daughter. I'm a really good friend. Recognizing all those things about yourself and making a list. So, writing them down, there's something to be said about handwriting that has a meditative impact on the brain. So, writing down all the things that you are. And if you're in a space that you can't see it in yourself, ask someone. Ask your partner, ask your parents, ask your best friends. What do you see? What are the things that you see about me? And then write those down. Write down what they say and put it somewhere where you have to look at it. And the last thing is perhaps the hardest thing to do, and that's to treat ourselves with self compassion. And that's recognizing a moment of kindness and not being caught up in that judgment and treating ourselves with kindness in that moment, allowing ourselves to say, wow, this moment is difficult. I'm having a hard time, and acknowledging it and not trying to push it away with whether that can be anything, shopping, drinking, it can be anything. When we try to push it down is when we end up getting ourselves in trouble. But again, going back to those 90 seconds, when we feel it and allow ourselves to acknowledge it, I'm having a hard time right now. Treating ourselves with compassion allows ourselves to help release those self limiting and self stigmatizing thoughts.
Yeah, I love that, and it is so powerful. And I was trying to remember. I'm like, she said something. I'm glad that you, like you brought it back to the beginning, because those I am are truly powerful. I know
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when I still drive my daughter to high school, and sometimes it's like we're running late, and sometimes oh, I'm so pissed off. Because we're running late, right? In my head, I'm like, I'm so pissed off. I can't believe we're getting off and so late or whatever. And I'm like, why are you so pissed off? I mean, there's no, like we already, it is what it is. We already, we're late. Let's say it, for instance, I'm just putting that example because sometimes it's like I'm pissed off because of traffic, right? I just put my daughter as an example. She's gonna listen to the podcast and she's gonna say, Mom, do you really say you're pissed off? But I am, when I say I am pissed off, it's like you get more irritated. It's like when I'm
Absolutely.
in traffic.
The anger comes up and you're walking around like this. But
And
if you say, I am someone who is angry right now, or I'm feeling anger right now, and you're not saying I am pissed off. I am angry. But the way the language we use, I believe, has a big impact on the way that we experience what it is we're saying.
Right. And usually, like I try to switch real quick with I'm listening to podcasts. I usually put podcasts. Um I don't listen to the radio. It just pisses me off more. So I listen, to talk shows, and I'm like, I'm gonna listen to some music, and my daughter's like, you give me so much headache when in the morning because you're listening to podcasts, and I just need some quiet time. I'm like, okay. So I just put, on one AirPod, and I just listen to music, like usually like Christian music, or I just listen to a podcast, something that to lift me up, you know.
Mhm,
So, entrepreneurship often requires individuals to navigate uncertainty and setbacks, a lot of setbacks, and not just entrepreneurs, and professionals as well. How can female entrepreneurs build resilience in the face of failure or adversity, and what role does self-compassion play in this process? And again, failure could mean anything to many people,
mhm.
but for the most part, adversities, and because you talk about self-compassion.
Absolutely. And you brought up my favorite word, which is resilience. And I had a life coach. It was my very first life coach who called me resilient. And I didn't know very much about that word at the time. I certainly wouldn't have used it to describe myself. And I didn't know that it was something that I should be proud of. Um, and I love resilience because it takes practice. A lot of people think that resilience is overcoming hardship, or I think even the Webster's dictionary definition is elasticity, so bouncing back. But I think it's using our experiences, whatever they are, to propel us forward. So, learning those lessons. So, for example, asking ourselves, going back to what can I learn from my experience? So, using our past experience and to go back for a moment to use myself as an example, I let my experience in the beginning, I chose to stay there. I didn't choose to learn from my experience. I didn't choose to use what had happened to me to find a way to make me better until I actually met my mentor. I chose to stay stuck in everything that I was experiencing. And we always have that choice. You have a choice to stay here or to grow. And it's up to you what you're going to do. But resilience is a practice, it's a skill that you hone. And it's something that is empowering, but again, it takes practice in order to be able to do it. So you talked about the uncertainty and being faced with not knowing what is going to happen next, and how can we use our resilience to better that or build on that or move forward in that. And I think that again, it's looking at going back and looking at how we've gotten through previous things. So let me use a personal experience right now. So, for example, my mom has dementia, and my mom has always been my rock, my hero. how many of us probably feel that way about our moms. And she's elderly. She's actually in the hospital right now. And I thought about when she first got diagnosed, it was, how will I ever, how will I ever go on if I don't have my mom? Like, I couldn't imagine ever being in this world without my mom. And my resilience that I have, and tuning into it and knowing that I have it because of the way that I have handled previous situations and my mental health, but not just my mental health, the way I've handled being laid off from a job, or I'll use a big one like that, has shown me that I will get through this, that I can dig into my own strength and ability and use that, that will get me through the hard times that we have ahead now. And it's tuning into that resilience. I have the choice of making it all about me. And how am I ever going to go on? Or, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And that ties back to the self compassion you talked about, acknowledging in this moment that what's going on with my mom right now, this is hard. I know that this is hard, but I also know that I have the strength and resilience to get through no matter what happens. So it's looking at that uncertainty that you talked about. And I didn't tie it into a something that would happen in our entrepreneurial life, but it's using the experiences that we've already had, whether, and it doesn't have to be, it's our personal experiences that we've already overcome or are overcoming, that will benefit us in our entrepreneurial life as we continue or face challenges or uncertainties that we don't know what to do with.
You mentioned so many things that I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And we give ourselves so little credit. And I think you mentioned that at the beginning. We don't give ourselves enough credit to really know that we will get through things, right? Um,
Mhm.
like when my kids were little, it was like, oh my God, I hope I can make it through until they can talk. And then, oh my God, I hope I can make it through until um, they're working and they know how to defend themselves, and they know how to, I don't even know what the words I'm looking for, but knowing that they will be okay, that we can
Mhm.
get through things because we don't give ourselves enough credits. Same thing when my grandmother passed away. My mom's still alive, thank goodness. But she was my rock. She was my everything. She was my hero. And it's like, oh my God, so who would I talk to? Like sometimes when I want to remember things like from my childhood, or oh, remember this, and how, who do I, and like things like that. And it's true, is going back to that we don't give ourselves enough credits. And I think I didn't know how powerful or resilient I was until, like I start looking back in a timeline. Like, how did I get through this?
Mhm.
And it's always, I love personal growth and personal development. And back then I didn't know that was the thing. But
Mhm.
working on myself and making sure that I make the right choices, even though I made poor choices when I was younger, whatever. But knowing that it will be okay, right? So my
Mhm.
question, how can entrepreneurs, and I'm going back to professionals and entrepreneurship, and business owners, balance the demands of this entrepreneurship with personal well-being, and what are some self-care practices that female, and I say female because 98% of my audience are females, so how can they incorporate well, because you talk about the mind, body, and I don't know if you mentioned spirit, but it's the
Mhm.
mind, body, soul.
Absolutely.
It's all connected. So, what are
Mhm.
some of these routines that they can prioritize? Their mental health. And I know you mentioned something about you're a writer, and you mentioned something about writing in the 90-second rule. Uh,
The 90 seconds it takes for an emotion to pass through.
Right. So maybe they're driving and they're like, I don't have a time to journal, or I don't have time to this, or we can put all the excuses that we want. But like you said, we always have a choice. So
Mhm.
what could be something easy that maybe on a any moment that we're like in the heat of the moment, right? How can we shift that? How can we incorporate? What can we incorporate? Oh my goodness, I'm going.
So there's a couple things that come to mind. And one of them, there's a couple things that come to mind, and they're mini meditations. So when it comes to self-care and taking time for yourself, and that's something I alluded to in the beginning, the slowing down. So with entrepreneurs, you got a lot going on. Um, and it's taking that moment to slow down, which could be the most difficult things to do. So in that slow down or in a morning routine and taking time, and I think doing these things before you start your day are crucial, but meditation is a big one for me. But there's many meditations that you can do when you don't have the time to do it. And some of those may be um, pausing, pausing, taking a deep breath, stopping, taking a deep breath, letting it go, and thinking of three things you're grateful for in that moment. Now, I keep a gratitude journal at night, every night, but because I like falling asleep on the good, I found that when I tried to go to sleep, my mind would race and think about all the things I didn't get done that day or things I could have done differently. And when I focused on the good, I'd fall asleep faster. But sometimes it's in the moment, just stopping. What am I grateful for right now in this moment? Three things. If you can't think of three, one thing that you're grateful for right now in that moment, um, that's helpful to shift your mindset, because when you take that breath, the breath coupled with the gratitude immediately shifts your mindset. So that's one thing. And if you can't find anything to be grateful for, taking the breath helps in general. Just taking that deep breath is very crucial. Another thing that is taught a lot in mental health, but I think it can be helpful in a lot of different areas when you're overwhelmed and you're feeling really, really overwhelmed or stressed, and you're so stopping for that moment and focusing on five things around you. What are five things I can see, I can feel, I can hear, I can taste, and I can touch. So stopping and looking for those five things grounds you. It grounds you into this moment. It brings you back into the present moment. And I know that it can be so easy to be five steps ahead of ourselves, worried about what's going to happen next, or we're focused on what just happened and replaying it, like I talked about, over and over again in our minds. But when we focus on those five things, just like focusing on the gratitude, it brings us into this present moment and helps us relax. And the third thing, which is the easiest thing to do, and anybody can do it at any time of day, and that's stop yourself and smile. Just smile. If you don't feel like smiling, that's all, force yourself. That's all the more reason to smile. When we smile, it sends signals. It helps bring us to right now. It sends signals to our mind that, I don't know, our minds heal it. Smile. And when you smile, you're making the person you're looking at, the people around you, smile. It doesn't even matter. No one has to know why you're smiling. Or again, even if you don't have a reason to smile and you think of something that makes you smile, it's going to have a big impact on your day. So these little things that, when you don't have time for a big meditation, but you take these little things in the moment, just doing one of them can bring you back to the present moment. If you find yourself overwhelmed or you find yourself stressed out, take those few moments. And I can't say that enough, that when you want to go quicker, when you want to go faster, take, lay back, slow down. And that actually helps you go faster and speed up.
I love it. You mentioned so many good things, and sometimes when we think, oh, but that's so simple to do, and sometimes it could
Mhm.
be the hardest thing to do because they're so simple, but they're so powerful. Smiling, a lot of, like I'm always smiling and laughing. I'm always laughing. My husband says that I laugh about the stupidest things. Commercials is like that's not even funny. I don't know. I just found it funny, and I'm always laughing. And the smile, when you hold, and there has been studies on this, when you hold your smile for a few seconds, even if you're pissed, it's like the muscles in your face start tingling and start sending signals to your brain, and your mood changes. Oh, maybe
Mhm.
people can try it. Just smile.
Mhm. Smile.
And something that I haven't tried, like, is sometimes we have the tools and we don't even remember. Is that focus on five things that you mentioned, like the taste and things around you that you can touch, that you can smell. When something smells good, it's like the mood changes. I love it. So let's go to this question. What is one thing you stopped apologizing for that helped you reach your next level of success or growth? And again, success can mean whatever success means to you.
I think, and I'll go back to the resilience for a moment. I've really thought about this, but it's been said that resilience is not overcoming, it's becoming. And I think that what I have stopped um apologizing for is not feeling good enough. So I have allowed myself to, I have known now that I've stepped into that next level version of me. So I think what I stopped apologizing for is staying in a smaller version of me, being comfortable in this space. And it's not necessarily apologizing, but I have stepped up to this space. And that's what I help my clients do, is get out of their comfort zone and step into that next level, whatever that looks like for them. And that's what I finally stopped apologizing for, is playing small and stepping into the person that I'm meant to be.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm always saying I love it, but I do. I really love when people express, like what is that one little thing? And sometimes it could be a lot more that, for other people. But I love that you stopped playing small. I love that. Well, thank you so much for all the wisdom that you share with us today. Where can people connect with you and find out more about how you can help them? Where are you most active?
Yes, so I'm active mostly on Instagram, and you can find me at michellekapotz.com. It's all spelled out. Michelle Kapotz, DOTCOM, spelled out. That's my Instagram handle. And there's more about me on my website, also at michellekapotz.com. And Michelle is with one L.